Alright, so for my exam, basically you have the two cylinders here, and you're trying to solve for this angle beta right here, but you aren't given anything else other than the angle between these two spheres and their masses. So the first thing that you should start off doing is you should definitely make free body diagrams for both spheres. So you can see here my first sphere, which correlates to here over here. I have a normal force from the wall pushing straight in the x direction against the sphere. I have my normal force from the other sphere, which is basically right here, and that's pushing in this direction. And then I have the 50-pound mass going straight downwards, and this angle here was notated in the exam prompt to be 28 degrees. With that, you should be able to equate your fx equals to 0 and your fy equals to 0 here, which should get you that basically this normal force in the wall here is going to be equal to the x component of this force here. So I have F norm of A, which is this force, is equal to F norm of B, which is this force, sine of 28, which gets me the x component of this. This 50 pounds isn't put into the Fx equation because it's purely in the y direction. Next, I equated for the y forces for this sphere. So for the y forces, I have the normal force here from the spheres, and I have a 50-pound mass. So I have 50 pounds is equal to this F norm B, cosine of 28, because that's the angle here, and that gets me the x component of that force. Now that I've equated those out, I know how all these forces relate. I'm going to do the same thing for the second sphere here. So for that, I have my F norm B force, which is right here, pointing in this direction now. The angle is still 28 degrees. I also have my F norm C, which is the normal force from the ground here, basically, pushing up into the sphere. However, I don't know this angle beta because that's the thing I'm solving for. You can see here that since this angle here is beta, I can make it the same as here, where it's downwards. This angle here is the exact same degree as this angle over here. So I'm going to label that B for now, just because I don't know what it is. I have the same 50-pound weight pushing straight down. So now I'm going to equate my Fx, my Fy, both equal to 0. For my Fx, I have F norm B sine 28, which is the y component of this force up here, is equal to F norm C, which is the normal force from the ground, sine of beta, which is the y component of that normal force here. So that's my... oh wait. Sorry, I got it mixed up. Fx is F norm B sine 28, which is the x component, not the y component. And F norm C sine B is the x component here. I got it messed up with a y component. Sorry about that. For the y components, I'm going to do the same thing. So this is what I was actually trying to say. F norm B cosine of 28, which is the x component of the B normal force between these two spheres, is equal to, or F norm B plus the 50-pound mass here, because that's also going straight down, is equal to F norm C, which is the normal force in the ground pushing upwards, which is cosine of beta. So now that I've equated these forces, I know that I can't solve these without getting F norm B. So I need to solve for that first in order to do anything with the second sphere. So I'm going to go look at the first sphere and see if there's anything I can use to solve for whatever my normal force between the two spheres is. I see here that I have a known on one side, and the only unknown is F norm B, so I'm going to use this. As you can see here, what I did was I took the 50, divided it by the cosine 28 to get what my F norm of B is. And that should get you that F norm B is going to be equal to 56.63 pounds, which means the normal force between these two spheres is 56.63 pounds. Using that, I should be able to solve for F norm A, which is the normal force here, because now I know this force here is 56 pounds. I also know that its x component has to be equal to F norm of A, which is the normal force from this wall. So when you solve for that, you're basically going to equate F norm A is equal to F norm B, which we already solved for as 56.63 pounds, sine of 28. When you plug that in, you should get 26.59 pounds. So now that I know both the normal forces here, F norm A has 26.59 pounds, and F norm B to be 56.63, I can move on to my second sphere to solve for stuff there. Now I know that this F norm B is the same as this F norm B, because it's a normal force between two spheres. So now that I have F norm B, I can see that, well, hey, I have this side of this equation solved, I have this side of this equation solved. However, I still don't know what beta is. So what I can actually do is, instead of trying to figure out a really complicated equation, I can just use a triangle composed of the x and y components in order to get the angle. So what I did is, well, hey, I know that F norm C is a force pointing in this direction. it has an x component and a y component. And I just solved for what those have to be. Because this is f norm b sine of 28, which is the x component. And I said that this has to be equal to the x component of f norm c, which is this force here. So now I know that the x component of that has to be equal to some value. I also have f norm b cosine of 28, which is the y component of this normal force, plus 50-pound mass, because mass of the sphere here is also pointing downwards, is equal to f norm c cosine b, which is the y component of the f norm c, the normal force from the ground. So now that I know my x component here and my y component here of f norm c, I can solve for them. When you do that, you should get that your x component of the f norm c is 26.59 pounds, and your y component of f norm c is 100 pounds. So now that I have these two forces, I'm still trying to solve for this angle here. I now know that the x component is this, the y component is this. If I use tangent, I can use tangent to the power of negative 1 is equal to 26.59 divided by 100, because opposite over adjacent. Using that, I should be able to solve that the angle beta is equal to 14.89 degrees. So now I've basically solved for everything in this problem. I don't need to do anything else at all. So I have my angle, which is 14.89 degrees, and when it asks you for the force between the two cylinders, it's basically saying what's the normal force between these two cylinders. I already solved for that earlier on. It's 56.63 pounds, and that's everything that you need to do for this exam. It's pretty simple once you equate all the forces. The hardest part is probably figuring out how you use the x and y components to get the angle beta, but that's just a little bit of making a triangle out of the components. So that should be everything.